Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Viet Nguyen. I'm here with Diego Kamenker from the HL7 Re-envisioning Task Force. Wayne Kubik, our CTO, wasn't available today for this discussion, so he sends his regrets. We are reprising our presentation from last week regarding the provisioning of FHIR ecosystem environment to support implementers, RFI, RFP. And so I will hand it off to my good friend and colleague, Diego, to run the presentations. What we would like is if you could put your questions into the chat, that will help us track the questions and be able to address them. And if for some reason we're not able to address them immediately, it'll allow us to document them. So thank you very much, and handing it over to you, Diego.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to the next slide. So it's a RFI and P because we want to have some feedback before the actual thing goes out. So we are creating this implementation division for enhancing our support to the implementers, to make it a part of what our job it is, but we want it to be more so. And this FHIR ecosystem is one of the projects we have in our plans, and I think it's one of the more important projects. So the first component will be the logical sandbox, and we think that we need more components and more services to provide a testing environment to begin with, and maybe something else in the future, like a gallery or whatever. We think it would be easy for a new person to understand what we do and how we do it. And what we want now is some feedback from you on how to do it and what will be useful for you and how can you help. So next one. So these are some of the capabilities. This is not an exhaustive list. If you have any other ideas, these ideas are shared by ourselves and other participants, and we can add capabilities without making it impossible. Because if we add all the capabilities we think, then we can be 100 years creating it, and that's not the idea. So we need to have some tools to manage the ecosystem. We need to provision FHIR servers, deploy them, configure them, and do some management of the data that is in the servers. Some kind of endpoint directory service to allow us to configure, or the users to configure their own endpoints and publish them. Services for authorization, authentication, and security linked to these endpoints. Terminology services. If you compare this to the FAST project, some of the issues are the same, because we want in the future, we want any new project, a new accelerator, or a new affiliate, or whoever is creating a new implementation guide and wants to test it in this environment, to share the services and not to create everything from scratch, so we can reuse our efforts and show the world that you can reuse and you don't need to create everything from scratch every time. And then some testing services and the ability to have a log of these testings and the results. Some tools for user management. And as I said, some kind of application showcase. So after we have everything tested and it looks fine, why not showing it to the world? So if you are new to our community and you want to know, okay, these are the IGs, but how is this working? How can I tell what it does beyond reading? And this is a way to show. And then how to manage the subscription level. This may not be free. We don't have yet the actual prices nor the mechanism, but there should be some kind of subscription levels and services attached to these subscription levels. Next, please. And these are some of the communities we think we will be engaged in this, apart from patient providers and payers, all the public health agencies, researchers, people creating policy measures, registries, social services, and also developers and FHIR technology or cloud or any other service vendors and EHR and laboratory and radiology and any other specialty vendors, device vendors, and also terminology and knowledge providers, and also healthcare information exchange. But this is not exhaustive. Also, maybe you can think on more communities or more people participating, and this is also nice to know. Next. So some of the questions are, you think is this ecosystem concept is feasible or not? We think it is, but maybe we're wrong. What else you think we should include or we should not? Any special considerations that you can recognize in the architecture to support testing? And what is the first thing we should do? We have our ideas, but you may have another ideas. We want to know what are the priorities and what is the most important thing, and also estimating the level of effort to realize this vision in which time frame. And also, if you have any ideas over the sustainability model, also we will like to know. And the other question is how you will be able to participate. You may participate in kind by providing architects or developers. You can participate in an advisory group on what and how to do it. You can donate services like hosting, software, or data. You can sponsor the ecosystem. You can subscribe to the ecosystem, and you can be contracted to provide technical services or any other participation you may think of. So next, and we are done. That was fast. So this is the fun part now.
So we have one question for you, Diego, and I think I should probably answer this because you may not have this information around hosting costs for the current Logica Sandbox. I think we can give you some order of magnitude, but the agreement we have with Logica precludes us from giving the details, and their details as well with their agreements. But we can give you a good sense. In terms of right now, the Logica Sandbox is being hosted in AWS, so I think there are a total of maybe 6 environments that they use, and then when we have connectathons and stuff, they scale up computing power for each of those, and so we can get a sense to you what that is. And then estimates of growth is going to be challenging. I think at last estimate there are at least 3,000 registered emails on the Logica Sandbox. They're not, of course, not all active, but there is definitely strong demand and growth of that. And we would expect that the value of the ecosystem that we're envisioning would increase the demand for these types of this type of an ecosystem. Diego, you want to take the next one?
And what is envisioned for reparability and representative activities of these HL7 ecosystems? I'm not sure.
Mary, would you like to come off mute and answer? David, you might have to allow her to.
Yeah.
Certainly, as Diego described, the envision is that the community will come together and basically produce an event to show the implementations of the FHIR standard. As we know from the scientific community, every time you change those variables, or sometimes even if you don't change those variables, how will HL7 plan to address what is an appropriate interoperability threshold? Is it envisioned that the accelerators will be conducting reproducibility exercises with HL7 setting metrics for the participants? Just a little more and kind of resource provisioning, because repeatability and reproducibility is very hard to achieve across a variable community.
Yeah, I agree, and I have this problem. I'm running an ecosystem for one of our projects, and it fails. But it fails because some of the components fails or are not correctly managed. Usually, it's very stable. But I think it's interesting in the terms of also of the versioning of the components and what version of each standard each component supports. But I think we need to study that and make it happen. It shouldn't be that complex. Usually, if all the services are up and have the same kind of logic, you should be able to work with them.
So I could offer an opinion around the facets of your question, because I think it's more than one question. One is that it's not an event. And Diego's
it's continuous.
It's a continuously live ecosystem that allows the community to do continuous testing. So that's one.
Because this is what we are doing now. So we have a lot of, at least in some of my projects, they're always using it. It's like a permanent connectathon. Our sandbox is used like it was a connectathon all the time, and new people is using the services all the time, which happens in real life. So it's not something we just turn off and use it in another moment. It's something that is always running, and people is using from different places, and we don't know where.
And in terms of reproducibility and repeatability, I think Diego would agree with me that the interoperability, reproducibility, and repeatability and testing and conformance starts with really good implementation guides and the core FHIR specification that has the conformance and validation built into it. So we think that this is a virtuous cycle between the standards development activities of HL7 and the implementation support of those guides in development, as well as maturing and testing of those guides once they go through their various stages of maturity from STU1 on and ultimately until normative. So those are, we would utilize those aspects of the guides, and then what I think would like to feedback from the community is around how do we improve that testing and conformance. You'll notice that on this list, certification is not listed, and we left that out on purpose.
There's a question from Gora. Is there an existing minimum funding commitment for this project from HL7? I think not yet. It depends on what we find out with this RFP.
Yeah, at a minimum, in terms of existing funding, like Da Vinci has provided to Logica for the support of the sandbox, that support will continue and moved over to HL7 as well. It's not certainly not enough, but it's enough that it's keeping the sandbox stable and running at its current state.
Next question from, I'm not sure if Mary is okay with the answers or wants to discuss further discuss. But if you are not okay, Mary, please ask again.
No, I appreciate the answers. My head just went to, that's fantastic. to set the implementation guide with those conformance statements, but as different activities and different
No,
data
but
sets
I'm with
are
you
put
all the
into
way.
system.
I was trying to show someone this week how easy it is to make a resource conformant to immunization in US core, which is the simplest resource in US core. And we got the example from the guide and tried to validate it using $validate in a server that can validate immunization from US core, and it didn't. So I'm with you. I know the pain. And
Yeah, there are challenges. I live the pain as you have, Diego. You can't buy experience like that.
I prefer to have the pain and know it and fight it than having to have my head red against my guests when showing this. So it has to work. It's not impossible. We want to address Craig's follow-up. Are you asking vendors to host the environment and provide estimates for hosting it? It is possible. And if so, what do you propose they base those estimates on?
Yeah, Craig, if you want to come off mute and help us understand what information could we provide, and to the extent we know today, to help you.
Sure, thanks, Fit. Well, so what I gather from the current logic of Sandbox is each Sandbox is a Docker container with a bunch of services embedded in it, or a composed Docker container. I assume when you go and ask the Logic portal to create you a Sandbox, it's spinning up a new container for you and probably pushing it out to a Kubernetes service, which means every time somebody adds one, you need another Kubernetes pod, and you need nodes in the background to support those. And if they persist forever, then you're continuously growing that Kubernetes cluster. But without knowing, how long do those live? How many are there? How would you know to price that?
So I'm not a deep technician, and actually we have some folks who had some familiarity with this on the call. If you'd like to chime in, please do. The current Logica Sandbox is a multi-tenant model, and I don't think they're actually spinning up new containers as much as they're provisioning existing resources to, and they're not, you're sharing an RDS database, but not it's not a full-on new Docker container. And in addressing the issue that we've seen with Logica, that people create sandboxes and aren't using them, that's part of our sustainment.
I did that.
Yeah, I'd like to actually figure out a methodology where you can spin one up reasonably easily, but it has a finite lifespan, and if you're not feeding and nurturing it, that it will start to go away unless you are part of the subscription service for sandboxes. So someone was going to speak up.
This is Travis with Interopion.
Thank you.
You did cover it very well. Yeah, multi-tenant is the key word. Logica extended the FHIR server to support multi-tenancy, and so this is all open source. It's not proprietary, but that's so. From a growth perspective, only the backing databases schemas grow in line with the number of users.
Okay.
But the services are multi-tenant.
I was basing this on the community edition, which is a composed Docker container. I assume that's what the Sandbox was.
Yes, that's correct. But the FHIR server is multi-tenant.
Okay.
So it's a single. So you could deploy that community version and then run multiple accounts through it, multiple sandboxes through it without. It's not a deployment per sandbox.
Makes sense. Are the OAuth server and the key cloak and all those shared as well, or?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and with respect to that, we are in like I'll call it the phase one, the transition of the Logica Sandbox. We have taken over the keys and are still paying the bills, but our names aren't on the accounts. And that's an agreement we have with Logica. But the next phase will be to move services over to HL7 domains. And that will be we're sorting out how to separate some of the functionality that the Logica put in particular Keycloak that is used across Logica and the Sandbox, to move that functionality, depending on how we want to architect it within HL7, over to HL7, but it has to be separated. And that's where this time period allows us to figure that out. But we will need OAuth, we will need user authorization authentication, along with organizational level authorization authentication. Other questions?
Or it's making more a comment than a question, which is, then this looks more like an RFI to me than an RFP, and it's an RFEP, IP. It's whatever you call it, we need input.
And I think to an extent, I would say to the extent that we could, you can share under, not with that, we wouldn't share again your sense of the scale, and a level of effort and a cost that would help. And that's why we would need, we would like some pricing information, because that can help us a lot too. And Mary, I agree with you. Yes, I didn't put DevOps in there per se, but yes, we need a service desk and a bug tracker. And I had grouped them, or we had grouped them under that FHIR provisioning and deployment. So yes. Could be a short call.
Well, I can take up a little bit of time here. Just want to remind everyone that based on last week, we have extended the submission deadline to December 15th. It originally was November 30th, but now it's December 15th. I want to reiterate what Viet just said, that, ideally submissions should include financials. And then we have been using the contract listserv for our primary communication method, meaning you should sign up for that contract work listserv. And I'm putting that in the chat. And then one thing is, I know one of the questions that I discussed with an organization yesterday was, should submissions include post-launch maintenance? After we launch the Sandbox, if there's maintenance associated as well, how should the submissions deal with that?
I think so. Include everything you think it's useful, because if you have the initial price and there is some price after that and you don't know that, it's not good. So we want to know everything you have to tell us.
And having
Okay.
done personally government contracting and know how much time and energy can be used on this, as much information to your understanding that you can share would be really useful. But along with that is really that, how would you like to participate? Because the responding and the amount you can put in your response will help us gauge, how do we engage the community better in all these different areas. And so getting a sense of the support we have for the community to do this is important for us as well.
And then I see Mike Tushin posted a question on the chat.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Diego, would you agree?
Yeah, the latter.
Yes, that's what I thought. I mean, we're gathering information right now, and then we'll summarize that and create a more definitive RFP. So yes, this is an RFI.
Okay. That makes sense, because that helps us understand how to price things. If it's one level of effort, if we know we're going to be held to it, like on an award, versus, hey, here's sort of the ballpark, the estimate, here's the components we think need to be included, let us know which ones you agree with and disagree with, and then we really dig in at that point. So I actually am relieved to hear you say that.
Yeah, we'll blame somebody not on the call for wanting to make it an RFI, RFP.
Start by
I'm
saying
just the
Wayne wasn't here.
messenger.
It's his fault then, right?
I'm just a messenger, as Mike usually knows.
Right.
Diego, may I respond to Mary's question?
Can you share more on the governance structure for this new division? And I think that's another slide deck.
Yeah, this is part of the standards implementation division, that's current name. And so the ecosystem will be part of that division's auspices. But we're envisioning a function similar, but not the same as the TSC, but on the technical side, and membership is draws from the HL7 membership, just like the HL7 governance structures in general do. But as we mentioned in the response, we would look to an advisory group. I'm not going to say committee, that seems too strong, but an advisory group from industry to help guide its the ecosystem's growth, development, prioritization, things like that. And in my opinion, it would be drawn primarily from the member community of HL7, along with others who are primarily focused on implementation, who have that expertise. You can see them being drawn by the accelerators and others within the US and internationally, because we want to make sure that this is a community good that benefits everyone internationally, because the growth of FHIR is really international. Hope that helps others.
So one thing I'd like to do, and I mentioned it to both Diego and Viet before the call, and I think the three of us should stay on after the call, after everybody drops off, but definitely creating a vehicle communication where technical questions can be answered and addressed. And so the people who have reached out to me realize I don't have very many technical answers. Actually, that number is 0 typically. So I'm thinking Zulip, for those who aren't familiar with Zulip, that it is accessible via hl7.org to sign up. It is a messaging system, and so we'll have a stream that references FHIR Sandbox. So I'm putting that out there just to let everybody on the call here know that we will try to get a vehicle of communication up there for you to ask other questions. But more importantly, that type of information will be sent out in an email with the recording of today's session to the contract work listserv. So, definitely be subscribing to that so you get the information. And I think everybody did get the information because I sent out this Zoom information via that listserv. So.
All righty. Well, we thank you all for being here today. I'm sure there'll be additional questions and follow the course Dave just laid out, and we'll be in contact. We're very excited about it.
I will be continuing validating my immunization resource.
All right.
If you need me.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, folks.
You too. Thank you.
Appreciate it.